Okay, welcome everyone. We are here. My name's Eloisa Ramos, and I'm here with my friend Connie. Hi, Connie. And my daughter Sonia.
Hi.
Hi. And we are studying the course in Miracles, the text. And we left off with chapter 2, the separation and the atonement. And we are on the last section, section 8, the meaning of the last judgment. Okay, so I'll go ahead and start. One of the ways in which you can correct the magic miracle confusion is to remember that you did not create yourself. You're apt to forget this when you become egocentric, and this puts you in a position where a belief in magic is virtually inevitable. Your will to create was given you by your creator, who was expressing the same will in his creation. Since creative ability rests in the mind, everything you create is necessarily a matter of will. It also follows that whatever you alone make is real in your own sight, though not in the mind of God. This basic distinction leads directly into the real meaning of the last judgment. Okay, so that's kind of a good paragraph. Let's just go line by line. So one of the ways we can correct the magic miracle confusion is to remember that you did not create yourself. Okay. So the magic miracle confusion has to do with reversing cause and effect. And that's what magic is, when we make matter creative, when we believe that matter is creative. And what that means is that we are forgetting that the mind is the only causal level, and that we are mind created in the mind of God, in God's likeness. And so this is where we get confused, and it's saying it's helpful if you can remember that you did not create yourself, because that will correct that miracle magic confusion. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yes, because once we reverse cause and effect, we identify with the body, or we identify with an ego that's identified with the body. And then we believe that we are bodies that make themselves, which is such a common view, that it might seem kind of weird to reverse that, because we're so used to believing that, you know, two bodies made me. My mom and my dad made me as a body. So, but anyway, when we're apt to forget the true creator of life, which is what we are, when we become egocentric. And of course, the ego is the belief in separation. So if we're egocentric, what does that mean when we're egocentric?
Well, that we're believing in separation and the body.
Mm-hmm. And what do we believe about ourselves?
That we created ourselves.
Yeah, and that we're on our own, right? Little separate self with a private mind in the world, having to survive on its own. If we're an adult, and having to depend on other, you know, big bodies if we're a little body. Okay, and this puts us in a position where a belief in magic is virtually inevitable. So your will to create was given to you by your creator. So the source of creative ability, of creation, of the power of creation, is our creator, is the source of all life, source, power, who was expressing the same will in his creation. So in other words, we are extending it. When we create, we are extending that creative power, which is will, or the will of God. So we are sharing what we are as creation of one God. And that creative ability rests in the mind. And furthermore, it is a matter of will. And the Course distinguishes between willing and wishing. So when you read the text, make a point of noticing when it uses wishing and willing. It also follows that whatever you alone make, okay, so it's talking about the egocentric self that thinks it is alone in the world making things. And of course, whatever we make alone would be real in our sight, our eyes, but not in the mind of God. And it also distinguishes between the word make and create. So it's also, good idea to pay attention when and distinguish the two words. The basic distinction leads directly into the real meaning of the last judgment. Okay. So anything there before we go? No? Okay, Sonia, go ahead.
The last judgment is one of the most threatening ideas in your thinking. This is because you do not understand it. Judgment is not an attribute of God. It was brought into being only after the separation, when it became one of the many learning devices to be built into the overall plan. Just as the separation occurred over millions of years, the last judgment will extend over a similarly long period, and perhaps an even longer one. Its length can, however, be greatly shortened by miracles, the device for shortening but not abolishing time. If a sufficient number become truly miracle-minded, this shortening process can be virtually immeasurable. It is essential, however, that you free yourself from fear quickly, because you must emerge from the conflict if you are to bring peace to other minds.
Can you please scroll up the page, Eloisa? I
Oh,
can't see
yes.
the paragraph.
Okay. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Okay, anything there, Sonia?
Just the, what was it on 6? No, wait. It's just the idea that it over millions of years, like how long have we been just extending time, extending the denial? Like I can't even process like how, like millions of years. I don't know. It's just a
Well,
lot.
yes. Number 5, just as the separation occurred over millions of years. Well, think about when you think about, people that study, for example, anthropology, okay, and they go back to the beginning of quote unquote humanity. And then they go back and they say, well, there's all these civilizations prior to that. And there's, they have a timeline, right? I mean, we go back to the dinosaurs, right? To the little amoeba. So it's been millions of years since that idea, or at least in our mind, we have been separated from millions of years, because we've made this whole history to prove to ourselves that that's true, that life as a form, as a body, started out as a bacteria in the waters, in the oceans, whatever. So we're trying to go back and make up this story that says, this is how we evolved into what we are today. And it's a story of separation because that's what we perceive. We perceive these little separate things evolving and changing. And now we have all these different bodies, different species. And all of those differences are a perception of separation. So, I mean, if you think about the variety of species on the planet between plants and animals and, you know, bacteria and viruses, I mean, it's endless, right?
Yeah.
So, so we're saying, well, okay, it must have taken millions and millions of years, and we have all these samples of strata layers of rocks, right? So the idea of time is part of the idea of separation, and so it says here that it says it's interesting that of course judgment is not an attribute of God. Okay, it was brought into being only after the separation, when it became one of the many learning devices to be built in the overall plan. So it's interesting that it's looking at judgment as a learning device. Yeah, right. Because in so many ways we're trying to undo our judgments.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But I think that in the undoing of it, I think that we are learning
Mhm.
that there is no separation. So I can kind of see why that would be a learning device. Because definitely judgment is not an attribute of God. And the judgment is sort of what happens when that's the projection, you know, when we judge, we repress and we project. So we're making this hologram of a world here. And the idea is that we have been doing that for so long that here's what we see now. It's evolution. It has evolved, right? So, but it's all built by the judgment that is not an attribute of God. Okay, because remember on the paragraph that we just read, number 5, it also follows that whatever you alone make is real in your own sight, though not in the mind of God. So that's what we've done, is we've made this world up. And what's interesting though is that, you know, we also have a creation story in the Bible, and in the Bible it says that God made the world, that God made the animals, that God made humans. You know, first he made the light and the water, and you know, then the animals and all of that. So we've brought the truth, God, into the illusion, and we put him into our own story of having made this world and this universe. But if judgment is not an attribute of God, then God could not have anything to do with separation. He could not have made bodies that are separate. But so anyway, so we've made this world of separation through judgment. And now the last judgment is going to extend over a similarly long period, because at some point we let go of judging, we stop judging and just allow everything to be as it is, as it was created. And so the illusion that we've alone made vanishes, the veil vanishes. But if you notice, look at number 7, if a sufficient number become truly miracle-minded, this shortening process can be virtually immeasurable. Okay, so in that case, millions of years means nothing. So it is essential then that we free ourselves from fear quickly, because we're part of this sufficient number here. Because this is how we're going to emerge from the conflict and let go of judgment to bring peace to other minds. Yeah. Okay. All right. Anything before we go?
No.
Okay, Connie.
The last judgment is generally thought of as a procedure undertaken by God. Actually, it will be taken by my brothers with my help. It is a final healing rather than a meting out of punishment, however much you may think that punishment is deserved. Punishment is a concept totally opposed to right-mindedness, and the aim of the last judgment is to restore right-mindedness to you. The last judgment might be called a process of right evaluation. It simply means that everyone will finally come to understand what is worthy and what is not. After this, the ability to choose can be directed rationally. Until this distinction is made, however, the vacillations between free and imprisoned will cannot but continue.
Okay. Okay. So anything there, Connie, that comes up for you? Yeah.
No, but we just need to get on with it and do our part. Help our brothers.
Yes. And for those of us that kind of grew up with a lot of the ideas from the, Christian Catholic theology, the Last Judgment was definitely seen as God coming and, passing judgment on everyone as punishment, as separation again, the good from the bad. So it's,
Yeah, you've heard like a complete life review of
yeah,
everything you've ever done wrong.
yes. So it's still, that point of view still maintains the separation. So, and so, but this is saying that that's actually not true, that it's a final healing rather than a meting out of punishment. However much you may think that punishment is served. So it's the final judgment brings healing and lets go of the judgment that punishment is deserved. So it's almost, it almost sounds to me right here like we're letting go of the belief in sin, right? Because what's connected with the punishment is deserved? Well, it's our judgment of sin. Otherwise, we wouldn't be believing that anyone needs to be punished. And so punishment is a concept totally opposed to right-mindedness. And that's the aim, is to restore everyone to their right mind. And therefore, that means that we are going to evaluate correctly between what is really worthy and what is not worthy. And what that means is that we are valuing illusions, things that are temporary. We are valuing those, and therefore we're investing in those, and therefore we identify with being a body and what we think the world of bodies can give us. And that's why we have not completely let go of the wrong-mindedness. And so that's why we go back and forth. Number 8, until this distinction is made, the vacillation between free and imprisoned will cannot but continue. And when we talk about the will, the free will is the creative ability to create in the likeness of God, which is how we were created. And because otherwise we go back to the imprisoned will, which is the making. We become involved with making the world, into something, or changing ourselves to become better, um, um, that kind of thing. So, so until we can get that distinction and choose rationally what is truly valuable and worthy, which is eternal reality, what we are, we'll keep kind of going back and forth. And I think that's why it takes such a long time, is because we keep going back and forth. So, okay, number 4. The first step towards freedom involves a sorting out of the false from the true. This is a process of separation in the constructive sense and reflects the true meaning of the apocalypse. Eventually, everyone will ultimately look upon his own creations and choose to preserve only what is good, just as God himself looked upon what he had created and knew that it was good. At this point, the mind can begin to look with love on its own creations because of their worthiness. At the same time, the mind will inevitably disown its miscreations, which without belief will no longer exist. Okay. Okay, this last sentence brought up for me the idea of the healing the past. So when we look at, when it's talking about disowning its miscreations, I was just looking at that. I was noticing some of the stories that I had made in order to hold on to the grievance in the past. And those stories I realized were miscreations, because I had been projecting what I did not want to see in myself. And once I realized they were miscreations, and once I realized that that was an investment in illusion, that's an investment in what I made alone. And it's also a way to keep myself separate. It's a way to put distance between some of my past friends and myself. And so I was able to let that go, which was really interesting. I hadn't actually really seen the healing process happen like that. But I can see how the last judgment is a healing of the mind, because it's the false mind that's holding on to all these grievances. And in a way, they're kind of like our babies, because there are little stories about, how so-and-so did me wrong. And that's what it means by sorting out the false from the true. Because we believe those stories to be true, but they're not. We made them up. And so, and the apocalypse is a book in the Bible that is talking about the end of the world. I mean, it's and it would be the end of the world that we made alone that is false, but we believe it's true. So it's really a healing process, because it's a letting go of the past judgments that we made. Yeah. So anything there? No, Connie, do you have anything for that?
No, I was just keep getting bombarded with things, and I
I think she froze.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, go ahead
There
and
we
take
go.
number 5.
Oh,
Oh.
there she is.
Okay. Okay.
Go ahead.
All right.
Sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead, Sonia.
Okay. The term, quote, last judgment, unquote, is frightening not only because it has been projected onto God, but also because of the association of, quote, last, unquote, with death. This is an outstanding example of upside down perception.
Mm.
If the meaning of the last judgment is objectively examined, it is quite apparent that it is really the doorway to life. No one who lives in fear is really alive. Your own last judgment cannot be directed toward yourself because you are not your own creation. You can, however, apply it meaningfully and at any time to everything you have made, and retain in your memory only what is creative and good. This is what your right-mindedness cannot but dictate. The purpose of time is solely to, quote, give you time, unquote, to achieve this judgment. It is your own perfect judgment of your own perfect creations. When everything you retain is lovable, there is no reason for fear to remain with you. This is your part in the atonement.
Okay. Okay. Anything there? The last judgment is associated with the end of the world. And well, because we associate the world with life for the body. But the body is not life because it's not eternal life. And life is eternal, created by an eternal God. And so that's why it's saying that this is an outstanding example of upside down perception. So when we go into fear, if we are afraid of the last judgment, okay, we're not in our right mind. And that's why it's upside down. So, so what it's saying is that it's really the doorway to life eternal, okay, of recognizing that we are not a body, and therefore we don't die with a body. And it's also saying that to live in fear is not to really be alive. And if you've experienced moments where you don't have any fear, you can get a glimpse of what this is saying here. Okay, because when we're in in fear, it's literally like it's literally like being in a nightmare. And it feels like, let's see, it's a very heavy kind of a very dark kind of place to be. And so so as far as the last judgment here, what it's saying is that if we are able to look at our own miscreations, and fear is our own miscreation, and look at what we have made that is fearful, and let that go, recognizing that it's not creative, and and is not really good. And we let go of all of those fearful events that we've have stored in our memory. And what's really weird is that what tends to make impact on our memory and we tend to hold on to are memories of past pain and hurt and what we call trauma. Okay, because the instinctive brain wants to hold on to those as a way to protect from having those happen again. Okay, but because they're fear-based and whenever we tune into them, there's fear, we are actually miscreating by holding on to them. And because there is a projection, we're trying to project what the mind cannot tolerate, we end up having to experience them over and over again because we're projecting them out into quote unquote the world to try to save ourselves from them. But what we're actually doing is we're miscreating and making them show up again, because we've got them in our unconscious mind. And the unconscious mind is going to project them because we've repressed them so that we don't see them. So they're going to have to show up because they're intolerable. They're not just intolerable to the conscious mind, they're intolerable to the unconscious. So anyway, so the purpose of time.
Question there.
Yeah.
So even, okay, so say some of them that you haven't kept repressed, but do come up again. What are we holding on to those for? I mean, it doesn't feel like that, we're trying to keep them from happening again. I'm not quite sure.
Okay, well, if you think of one, okay, if you go into that, you'll notice that memory, the result of having that memory is to keep you away from someone. Like for example, me, the memory that I had was of a friend in the past, and something that they said, and I took offense to it. And the result of that was that I stopped communicating from them. I sort of cut them off, not completely, but somewhat. Okay, so the result of my holding on to that story of what happened and what quote unquote they did that they're guilty of, okay, the result of that is that I broke communication with them. So I separated myself from them. So the result is always separation, or it's going to be some form of sacrifice. There's going to be something, yes. Yeah.
There's still some purpose there of the ego. Okay. For any kind of fear.
Yes.
Like that. Yeah. Okay.
And so that's what the miscreations are, is that they are supporting the belief in separation. And they make us believe that we are not the one creation of God. So that's where we forget, that's where we go into the wrong mind, and we forget that we are created. We are one, that my brother, my friend, is a holy creation of God, innocent and pure. And I have forgotten that because I have put my own story on top of that. The other thing that was really interesting, we were watching the Matrix, one of the movies, because the new one came out. We saw it. We went back to watch the old ones. And this is the one with a revolution where they're, fighting all these machines. And it's like, oh my God, it's so intense to be in war like that. The way they portrayed the characters. And of course, I'm sure that it's a pretty accurate representation because we have all these people that have fought in wars, and a lot of them come back with PTSD, and it's a very traumatic thing to be in. And I was thinking about that, and I thought, well, geez, it's so fearful and it's so traumatic. It's like, it's almost like a death wish, but if we are wishing for death and we die, why would we ever be reborn? Why would we ever want to come back? We wouldn't. I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, I haven't been in a literal war, but I've certainly experienced a lot of fear in my life. And I'm saying, like, there's no way I want to repeat this. There's no way I want to come back. So why would I believe that 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 people are, so to come back means to not be in our right mind, because nobody in their right mind is going to come back after having gone through the experience of fear in this life. And it doesn't even have to be, like I said, it doesn't even have to be like war. In our everyday lives, we experience all kinds of fear. And so to believe that we came back lifetime after lifetime means literally that we're insane, because nobody in their right mind would choose that. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, so great. I don't have to come back and do this again.
Yeah,
I made the
because
right choice. Oh my gosh. Well, it's so interesting because everybody thinks we keep coming back and keep coming back, and till we get it right. Well,
yes, but that self that keeps coming back and keeps coming back is not the self that's in his right mind. You see?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that's why this is important here. The last judgment
Mhm.
means that we have evaluated correctly what is valuable here, and we are in our that we've chosen the right-mindedness.
Boy, if that doesn't make you want to really live this program. Yeah,
Yes.
get it right. Get that right-minded ready.
Yes.
And
So in other words, there's
whew,
when you really look at the experience of fear, there's a lot of willingness there to let that go. Although for the wrong mind, letting go of fear is fearful.
mhm, yeah.
Yeah, because it's what is familiar to people. Yeah. So anyway, so number 10, when everything you retain is lovable, there is no reason for fear to remain with you. And the insight that I got from that was if we go back to the beginning, what the Course says is that in the beginning, there was a tiny mad idea. Okay. And it's the belief in separation, and that the experience of time and space is because we took that tiny mad idea seriously. And therefore it means that we believed it. So it's not that the idea itself is a problem. The problem is that we took it seriously and believed it. And so what that brought up for me was, okay, well, in order for me to take that idea of separation seriously, it means that I have to take my own miscreations seriously. I have to hold on to my miscreations in my past that are fearful, and that, where I am not taking responsibility for what is happening to me, but I'm blaming other people. And I am holding on to those because I am afraid that I am guilty of actually that I chose separation. Do you see what I'm saying? So I'm afraid of my own will. I'm afraid that I'm crazy, literally, for having made that decision. And what I realized is no, I can't possibly be insane. I mean, when I was looking at that movie and I saw the war and all the agony and everything that was going on, it was like, no, there's no way I would choose that in my right mind. Okay. So if I'm here and I'm believing I'm here, then this cannot be true. You see? So my mind is starting to recognize the true from the false. And that's part of knowing the truth about what I am. That I can only be loving because God created me loving. And so if I am only love, then I would never have chosen separation. So it's almost like a what if scenario, and the story developed. And then I looked at the story and I believed it about myself. Yeah. And it's not true. So anyway. Okay, so any questions here with the meaning of the Last Judgment? So maybe that's what the meaning of the Last Judgment is when you finally look at your mind and say, wait a minute, all this time I thought I was insane because look at everything, look at the world. I'm seeing an insane world. And then I realized, oh, but that can't be true, you know? And it kind of takes me back to when I first started looking into A Course in Miracles. And this is when Sonia was little and had asthma. And every time that I saw her struggling to breathe, there was something inside of me that said, how could this be possible? How could a loving God make a world of suffering and pain? Okay. And that was not, I could not reconcile those two ideas. And deep down inside of me, I knew that that was not true. That could not, that's like when you decide, like, no, if God is loving, then this cannot be true. And that's when the mind takes a stand for what is true. You see? So it almost felt like that happened here too, because, okay, if God is loving and created me, Son of God, loving, okay, then I could not have chosen separation and made an insane decision. Okay. So therefore, I cannot be guilty. And so then there's awareness, there's an awareness of the innocence of the Son of God. And it's not just me, tiny little me, but it's of all creation. That no, we actually did not create an insane, horrible, vicious world. That's a dream. That's a nightmare that we're having. And when we wake up from that, we're going to see that none of that was true. Okay. Okay, so let's see, that's the end of chapter 2. So we're gonna stop here. I'm gonna, let's see, stop the recording.